Safety Justin Reid and defensive lineman Davon Godchaux were two of the Saints' best offseason acquisitions this offseason. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're continuing our off-season grades with a focus on new faces or a lack thereof. We'll dive into the lack of perennial playmakers added this offseason. We'll take a look at the draft class because it looks better and better by the day. I'll tell you what grade that draft class is getting from me now. And we'll take a look, kicking everything off with our A grades with Justin Reid and Davon Godchaux as two of the best additions for the New Orleans Saints this offseason. We got that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. New Orleans Saints safety Justin Reid and defensive lineman Davon Godchaux are two of the best moves, new faces, acquisitions for the New Orleans Saints, for me, this off season. I think that both of these acquisitions, they signed Justin Reid in free agency, traded a pick from a year in advance to the Patriots to get Davon Godchaux back to the state of Louisiana. And I think both of those moves will move the needle for the New Orleans Saints defense. So we talked a little bit in yesterday's episode about eliminating some of the big explosive plays, and both of these guys play a role in what it is that the Saints defense is trying to do under new defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, which is going to be trying to eliminate some of those big plays. Broken coverages, missed tackles, things like that. These aren't typically parts of the Justin Reid, Davon Godchaux experience. And there's a little bit of a ripple effect with both of these guys, as there typically are when it comes to new additions as well, in terms of bringing them in so they can hold down a particular role or a specific role, or as I said the other day, a particular role, and how that ends up impacting other players who now then get to be put into their best position or their best, alignments or whatever that might be. And so I'll start with Justin Reid here. I think the acquisition of Justin Reid is a really, really wise one for New Orleans. High forcing completion percentage throughout the course of his career when targeted deep. Typically makes quarterbacks move on deeper into their reads because of his good coverage, taking away things in the zone, deep zone areas when he's put in those situations. But he is also somebody that can come and play down in the box, that is a solid tackler, that reads, reacts, clicks, and closes very well in terms of seeing how play develop in front of him and then being able to go out and make that play. So you watch him sometimes when he's lined up near the line of scrimmage, covering, keeping his eyes out on the flats, and then he can see a play developing, whether it's a screen or a swing pass or something going out to that flats area. Watch him break on it very quickly and then go and secure that tackle or reroute that ball carrier so that the rest of the defense or other players from the defense would be able to get to them and bring them down. He has the instincts and the experience to give the New Orleans Saints, I think, what it was that they were hoping to get out of former New Orleans Saints safety Marcus Maye when the Saints signed him years ago. Same season that they signed Tyrann Mathieu, who has now been in New Orleans for 3 years, has helped to lead the team in interceptions all 3 of those years as well. And now you get what you were intending to get with Marcus Maye, who couldn't stay on the field, was dealing with injury, and when he was on the field was kind of a non-impact player. You get a guy like Justin Reid who has the versatility, who can cover, who can tackle, who has experience, who has good instincts, and still has very good athleticism to his game as well. This is a really solid addition for New Orleans. And then we were discussing sort of the ripple effects that come with an addition and how he potentially helps to see, Tyrann Mathieu get into more advantageous positions and utilized in certain ways, right? Like the last coaching staff felt very much that they couldn't rely on Tyrann Mathieu near the line of scrimmage, wanted him to actually play further away from the line of scrimmage. We'll see how this coaching staff does, I think Tyrann Mathieu a good player for you to have near the line of scrimmage. So if you can get good deep coverage from Justin Reid, then allows you to be able to utilize Tyrann Mathieu as a bit more of a disruptor up near the line, in the box, all those other things. But if this staff feels better about Tyrann Mathieu playing deep and in coverage, or playing and manning the middle of the field, kind of prowling in that way, then you could certainly see Justin Reid climb back down and play down in the box, play near the line of scrimmage, all those other pieces. And then with good safety play, allows you to be able to maximize and help out, give help to your young corners that are going to be on the outside. Now, Isaac Yiadom probably is one of your starting corners, at least early on in the season, 7 years of experience there, but you're still going to have Kool-Aid McKinstry, a second-year corner, over on the opposite side. So having solid safety play helps, and having good safety play that can help you over the middle of the field, that can be that last line of defense, helps a guy like Alontae Taylor being a disruptor and being able to be utilized in a lot of different ways as well, right? You have a good safety that you know that can man the field deep, and you have another one that you know can cover out of the slot. And that means you can free up Alontae Taylor to blitz. You can send Alontae Taylor on those, heat-seeking missile type plays, and then be able to still manage with the coverage that you would have with the other four guys. And so I think the ripple effect there is really kind of easy to pick out about why an addition like Justin Reid would be a good addition, or is a good addition for New Orleans. The other player that we are discussing here is Davon Godchaux, who comes in and helps out this team mostly from a run defense standpoint. We've talked a lot about Davon Godchaux's versatility as well in this 3-4 defense. One of the big question marks about the Saints when they were moving over to this Brandon Staley defense is, do they have the personnel to be able to play a 3-4 stand-up edge rusher, nose tackle, 3-4 defensive end type of defensive front? And with a guy like Davon Godchaux, as well as other additions that we'll actually highlight here in a little while, including Texas defensive tackle Vernon in Broughton, who I think helps you here too, you get the versatility. You get the opportunity to have a guy that can play that 3-4 defensive end and be disruptive there, both as a pass rusher and as a run stopper, but that can also move inside, Godchaux can, and play that nose tackle role. And so I think that he gives you a bit more of that. And then again, because of what you can get from a Davon Godchaux in either of those situations, it allows you to be able to use Colin Saunders where he's most going to be impactful for you, to move Brian Brzee to a 3-4 defensive end role where he can really lean in on his pass rushing prowess, get more one-on-ones, as we've discussed endlessly here on the show, that can help to bolster his production as well, both in the pass rush and in the run game. And so you can see a little bit of that ripple effect in terms of how an addition like Davon Godchaux is not just good because he is a really, really good run defender, an area where the Saints desperately need to eliminate the explosive plays and simply just get better, allowing nearly 5 yards per carry last year. He's going to help you move that number, whether it be in 2025 or whether it take until 2026, whatever. There's a lot of help that he gives you there, but he also makes it possible for you to get players in more advantageous positions to be able to operate a little bit more with their skill sets. So I think that he, like Justin Reid, gives you sort of the multiplicity in terms of the way that he makes not just your defense better because of his addition, but because of what you can now do with the other players. So for me, Justin Reid, Davon Godchaux, both A's when it comes to offseason additions. Coming up next, let's talk about our B grade, which is a climbing grade for the New Orleans Saints draft class. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. You ever wish that managing your wealth could be, well, a lot easier? Well, now it can be thanks to Monarch Money. Whether you're trying to grow your savings, or maybe you're just looking to save up for a big purchase, or perhaps you're just trying to track your expenses, things like that in a more reliable way, well, that's where Monarch Money can absolutely help you not just get full visibility of your finances, but take full control over them as well. I treat myself like a small business, and Monarch Money has been very helpful with that because it allows me to be able to track my spending, track my budgeting, try to hit my goals that I can set for myself as well, but also manage my expenses, makes things a lot easier come tax time, all those good things. I absolutely love Monarch Money. And if you have a small business or are a small business, Monarch Money is for you. Go and take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com and get 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, family, the more that I dig into this New Orleans Saints draft class, this 9-player draft class, massive draft class for New Orleans, the more that I absolutely kind of dig it, really, really like it. I had mentioned that before the draft even began, one of my bold predictions was that the Saints draft class was going to get a bunch of really bad grades the moment that it comes out, no matter who they draft, what they do, all those other things. Because all of these experts out there kept saying, oh, they're going after Shedeur Sanders. They're going after Shedeur Sanders. And we kept telling you all the time locally that they were never in on Shedeur Sanders, that was not going to happen. But then all the folks that kept pushing that narrative and everything like that from the national perspective then go back to the draft grades and say, well, they didn't do the thing that I thought that they should do, so they get an F, they get a D, they get a C, whatever it might be. I initially gave the New Orleans Saints draft class a C. That felt normal, that felt right, because there were a lot of unknowns to it, right? Will Tyler Shough be the starter in 2025? Probably. Kelvin Banks was a home run, but no one was talking about him because a quarterback got drafted behind him. The third-round selections of Vernon Broughton and Jonas Sanker do help your defense, but they aren't the shiniest of moves. I love the addition of Danny Stutzman. I love the addition of Quincy Riley. I love the addition of Devin Neal late, and you got a pair of 7th-round picks as well with tight end Maliki Matavao, as well as Fidel Diggs out of Syracuse, formerly of Texas A&M. And so the more that I've gotten to research this, look at this, go back, watch what's going on, and try to not just watch what they did in college, but try to translate that to what we think Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley are looking to do on both sides of the football, it's easy to kind of boost this up a little bit. Kelvin Banks Jr. might be one of the least discussed first-round picks in New Orleans Saints history, as we highlighted, or in recent New Orleans Saints history, as we highlighted in yesterday's episode, but the guy is a mauler. He's excellent, and he's going to be a long-standing, so long as he stays healthy, left tackle for this New Orleans Saints team. Now, of course, they ended up investing in the offensive line for the third year out of 4 seasons over the course of the last 4 seasons, and so maybe that's a little bit egregious, but it's just sort of the situation they were in, and now they could probably close the book on that because they should feel pretty good about what they have on their offensive line, thanks to Kelvin Banks. Tyler Shough continues to impress. He did that interview with the St. Brown brothers and everything, where he, first of all, rightfully set Equinemius St. Brown straight about his horrible food takes about the New Orleans, the New Orleans cuisine, but also pushed back against the idea that he's too old and kind of met those narratives and approached that with a level of maturity that I thought was really good. And even Amon-Ra St. Brown, Detroit Lions wide receiver, kind of highlighted Tyler Shough might be in the best position of any drafted quarterback in the NFL for this coming year, this incoming rookie class. We actually discussed that in our Saints Squad show this morning, Dylan, John, Lance, and I. So I like where things are headed with all of that. We'll see if Tyler Shough becomes the week 1 starter or if he just becomes a starter later on in 2025. But I think he'll eventually, if not immediately, be the starter for this team because he is Kellen Moore's pick. And I think that's one of the other reasons why I kind of bumped the grade up on this draft class a little bit more too, is because Kellen Moore, everything that he has said about Tyler Shough and everything that he says that he wants from this offense have completely aligned as so far as watching it through mandatory minicamp, rookie minicamp, OTAs, all those kinds of things. And so we'll get a closer look at that, of course, during training camp. But the addition of Vernon Broughton, another versatile piece on your defensive line, much like Davon Godchaux, who we were just discussing, who maybe doesn't have a lot of snaps, didn't get a lot of opportunity in Texas, buried behind some fantastic defensive linemen, but now gets an opportunity to kind of step in, work with Bo Davis, his former defensive line coach at Texas, who's now the Saints defensive line coach. You can see a little bit of the vision there. Adding guys like Jonas Sanker and Danny Stutzman, who are fantastic tacklers. Adding a guy like Quincy Riley, who had 15 career interceptions and is a ball hawk. And you're looking at boosting your tackling. You're looking at boosting your takeaway numbers. All 3 of those guys help you in those areas. Devin Neal has the potential to be a big-time playmaker for this team coming out of the backfield. And then question marks, of course, around 7th-round picks, as there always are. But I do think that this New Orleans Saints draft class has grown on me and has grown on a lot of people over the course of the past couple of months, especially since we've gotten to see them a little bit more in action. And we can see where some of these guys can have the immediate impact that I think you need from this draft class. Now, we'll revisit this draft class again and again and again all throughout the season, after the season, in the next couple of years, all that. But so far, I would say that this draft class is trending in the right direction. I'll tell you what I give a C, though, when it comes to new faces, and that is the undrafted free agency class. Now, I don't think that the Saints undrafted free agency class is bad. I think that there are some players that I'm really excited to see more about. Jasheed Davis, Aaron Powell, Moochie Dixon. Like, there are still some of these guys that I think can end up latching on here, but the Saints do lack a little bit when it comes to what we have seen over the past few years, sort of that big time attention drawer when it comes to that undrafted free agency class. You think back to Joe Bocci years ago. I know it didn't pan out, but you think about the excitement that was there for him. You look at a Deontay Hardy, you look at a Rashid Shaheed, you think about just from this past year, Dallin Holker. You see these guys that probably should have been drafted that didn't end up getting drafted, that then wind up in New Orleans. And that is something that has always kind of boosted this team from the undrafted free agency perspective. However, this year, kind of missing that kind of, standout player when it comes to this draft class. There's guys that I like I mentioned, especially Jasheed Davis and Terrell Powell. I'm very excited to see both of those guys get their opportunities over on the defense. And I'll highlight Easton Kilty too, the offensive lineman out of Kansas State, formerly of North Dakota State University, has worked with some of the best offensive line developers or offensive line talent development coaches in college football on his way here to New Orleans. So good possibilities there, but nobody that's kind of this surefire, can't believe he didn't get drafted. Oh, of course he ended up in New Orleans kind of player like we have seen. But to the New Orleans Saints credit, I highlighted a couple of guys like Deontay Hardy, Rashid Shaheed. Both of those players were not players that many looked at and went, oh, they should have gotten drafted. I can't believe that they didn't go drafted. They didn't get drafted, all these other things, and then they ended up winding up in New Orleans. They were kind of guys that flew under the radar all the way through, and then through special teams, and then both of them gathering more opportunities on the offensive side of the football, especially Rashid Shaheed, both of them turned into kind of the hallmark, undrafted free agent success stories that we hear from New Orleans all the time. You go back to Carl Granderson was kind of similar as well. You go back to some of these other guys that have made the roster as undrafted free agents and have carved out roles for themselves. It's not always the most known players. So while I do give it a C, a lot of it is because we're waiting to see who pans out, right? And where things go, how things go for them, all those other pieces. So I give the undrafted class a C right now, but we'll see how that changes over the course of the next few weeks, next couple of months, all those other things. But just didn't feel like it had sort of the oomph that some of the previous undrafted free agency classes had. Coming up next, we're going to shift from the new faces that the New Orleans Saints did bring in to some of the spots where they missed. And that's what's going to get our D and F grades today. We got that coming up for you next. We continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Rouge Yet. Maybe you've heard of Viagra and Cialis. Heck, maybe you've even tried them before. But if you're looking to try something that's beyond the usual pill, then it's time to check out Rouge Yet Ready. We're talking about a 3-in-1 formula that dissolves under the tongue, kicks in fast, and average around 15 minutes with results that can last up to 36 hours so you can stay confident and ready when the moment is right. It's why 150,000 plus men have already made the switch. It's all completely online, and you get the opportunity to meet with a board-certified doctor, and it'll all ship discreetly and directly to your door. All you got to do is head over to rougeette.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rouge Yet website for full safety information. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. All right, we've been very nice to the New Orleans Saints on today's episode so far, taking a look at winning moves like Justin Reid and Davon Godchaux acquisitions, a nice draft class, a still to be determined situation with the undrafted free agency class, but clearly some potential there. Now, what I want to do is take a look at where the Saints did not necessarily perform. And so we're going to go with our D grade here, which is no new perennial playmaker added to the offense. Now, I need to caveat this a little bit. When I talk about a perennial playmaker, I'm talking about that potential Tyler Warren selection. I'm talking about that potential Ashton Jeanty get. I'm talking about that potential Teteroa McMillan draft selection, or going after a big name in free agency at wide receiver or running back, or some playmaking potential to be kind of added to the team. Now, there is a difference between potential playmakers and playmaking potential, right? Perennial playmaking potential. And so I acknowledge easily that Tyler Shough can become a playmaker for this offense, that Devin Neal can become a playmaker for this offense, but they don't walk into the building as guys that you point to and go, they're going to be playmakers in this offense. There's development, there's things to be done, there are other players in the way, all this other stuff. And so where the Saints didn't add was going out and finding that big playmaker. You might remember, if you were an everydayer all throughout the draft process, and if you were and you're still here, thank you very much for being here with us. You might remember that I talked about, it's not really about best player available for me at number 9 overall. It was about best playmaker available at number 9 overall. And look, Kelvin Banks Jr. coming in and being this potential long-term left tackle starter that has endless value for this team, because you could add all the playmakers that you want. If you don't shore up the offensive line, you're always going to come up at least a little short. Hello, Cincinnati. And so I think that that is something that I would be willing to say, like, okay, in exchange, you got Kelvin Banks Jr., it's absolutely there. But this was just kind of the situation that the New Orleans Saints were in. They didn't have a big opportunity outside of that top 10 selection to add a playmaker when it made sense. But then actually they kind of did, right? Like Isaac Tesla going off right before, could he have been that guy? Savion Williams going off the board, the wide receiver out of TCU, who could do a little bit of everything, going off the board just before the Saints were selecting, so on and so forth. So there were still those players as well, even in the later mid rounds, other running backs, other wide receivers that maybe could have been those playmakers for the team, but the Saints just didn't bring that player in. The board didn't fall their way. Other things I'm sure got in the way. The opportunity to add through free agency was very limited and everything like that. So I have to give the Saints a D when it comes to not adding that or finding that perennial playmaker over on the offensive side. And for the F grade today, I'm going to say something pretty similar, but over on the defensive side of the football, not adding any defensive game breakers. And again, the Saints were kind of hamstrung in this situation, right? You see the selections that they made throughout this NFL draft, not a lot of opportunity to go out there and get these, not a lot of opportunity to go out there and get these sort of big game-breaking edge rushers and things like that in this year's draft class without some controversy attached to it. So I don't blame the Saints from avoiding those situations. I get that. But the biggest playmaker that they bring to help their offense was Chase Young. But we're talking new faces, or a lack of bringing in new faces in today's episode. So I can't count the Chase Young day. So there's not really that new playmaker, game breaker that can come in that changes the way that an offense blocks, that changes the way that an offense schemes, all those other things. I think that Justin Reid can have an impact as a playmaker, but he's not a game breaker in that way. The Saints have Kool-Aid McKinstry stepping into their cornerback one role, but a guy like maybe Zadie Barron could have been, bigger, better, faster, stronger, whatever, you know what I mean? So there are these sort of elements of where the Saints could have added those game breakers, those playmakers on either side of the ball, and just didn't get that done. So I have to list that as D and F grades for this draft class, for these free agents, for the free agency class, for the undrafted free agent class, although you're not looking for playmakers and game breakers in undrafted free agency. But the opportunity to add those guys was present, most present in the draft, a little bit present when it came to free agency, but I don't blame the Saints for taking the route that they did in free agency. The Saints just didn't bring in those players that you bring, that, come in and either make a defense scheme differently to how they guard your offense, or an offense scheme differently because of how they need to avoid one side of the field, or they need to be very aware of one edge rusher or something like that. Saints just didn't bring in that new face, right? They can get that with guys that have been retained. Kool-Aid McKinstry going into a second year, Alante Taylor getting a more solid role, Chase Young coming back Having Chris Olave back healthy, having Rashid Shaheed back healthy, the incumbent players can bring a little bit of that, but just didn't add that new piece to the offense nor the defense. And I grade the defense a little bit lower because the defense is where you needed the most help. Like last year's defense, pitiful results in terms of what the end of the season, brought, right? 31st in the NFL against the run, lots of explosive plays, surrendered, kind of middle of the road, if not worse against the pass, allowed points to get put up on the board, all these other pieces. And so just kind of struggled in that area, right? And so maybe they're hoping that the coaching staff can kind of help to bring some of that playmaking and game-breaking potential back with the players that they have. But in terms of grading out new faces, new acquisitions, things like that, this is an area where the Saints lacked. They did not bring in those perennial proven guys. Development guys, absolutely. Guys that can grow into those playmakers and game breakers, 100%. Guys that can turn out to be those playmakers and game breakers in their first year, 100%. Always the possibility there. But not that guy that's that sure thing to really change what an opposition might try to do against your team, or how they have to game plan against your team, what they have to be concerned about, what strikes fear in an opponent. The Saints did not add a new face that brings that immediately off the bat. So that's why I got to give the Saints a little bit of some poorer grades when it comes to that area. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, I want to continue working our way through the draft class. We're going to skip Tyler Shough. I want to go straight to Vernon Broughton. And let's do a real deep dive on him and what he could potentially bring to this New Orleans Saints defense. Oh, and hey, by the way, for your second listen today, make sure you go and check out Jake Madison, Locked on Pelicans. Jeremiah Fears is a New Orleans Pelican. What does it mean? And what is on tap now for the Pels? All of that for you over at Locked on Pelicans today. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.